Peace and welcome to the Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has gone on record saying that he would eliminate 4 federal agencies if elected. Wow. I'm going to share with you which agencies he are talking about. And let me get your take on whether this is a good idea. We'll have that conversation. Also, we're going to be checking in with Dr. Iris Barnes, who's an historian, to talk about Juneteenth. Now that we celebrate the holiday, how do we make sure that the momentum from the holiday extends to the next year? So we're asking the question, Juneteenth, now what? We'll have that discussion. Later, we check in with our sister Suzette Speaks, the attorney, and our guy Sinead Rapport to talk about the Supreme Court's major decision to cut affirmative action at University of North Carolina and Harvard. What does that mean for race admissions in college education? And later, I got some more information as we talk about history, how, according to a new research genealogy report, more than 100 U.S. political leaders are ancestors to slaveholders. I'm going to share with you which ones they are, and it may be surprising, and then it may not be surprising. We'll have that discussion. So stay with us. A lot to cover here on today's edition of The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Let's jump right into it. The first one, folks, is about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and he's always in the news. But this time, this is very, very interesting to say at least, folks. The governor of Florida has decided to put out a little bit of his plans if he is elected president of the United States in the 2024 election. He has gone on record to say that he would eliminate 4 federal agencies. Let me share with you the latest from NBC News here. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said yesterday that if he's elected president, he would seek to close 4 federal agencies as part of an effort to reduce the size of government. Now, he said, quote, "We would do education, we would do commerce, we would do energy, and we would do the IRS. Boom. He said this in an interview with Fox News' Martha McCallum when he was asked whether he favored closing any agency. He said, quote, "If Congress will work with me on doing that, we'll be able to reduce the size and scope of government." He added that if Congress won't go that far, he said, "I'm going to use those agencies to push back against woke ideology and against the leftism that we see creeping into all institutions of American life." He wants to eliminate 4 agencies: the Department of Education, the Commerce, Energy, and the IRS. Folks, have you ever heard a president or presidential candidate say that he would eliminate the Department of Education, Commerce, Energy, and the IRS? Are we at that place? Folks, crew, I want you to join me into this conversation as we're streaming live on YouTube. Just look under Roland Martin's page on YouTube. Join the discussion, and I would love to get your take on this because this is mind-blowing. Checking in with all my culture crew. Big shout out to everybody there. I see my man Damon Bissett, my brother Lori Parks. I see you, Willie. Good to talk to you, Willie Frazier. I see my sister Tiana. I see Corinna. All of y'all are checking in. You don't like my music? Good to hear from you. This is great. You don't like my music? I want to let's pull up your comment. You said the moral arc of the universe only bends towards justice if we make it so. Right, referring to the great Dr. Martin Luther King's words. But you're right, absolutely, bro. Like, it only bends towards justice if we make it so. I have never seen this before. I have never heard this before, where a presidential candidate comes out as part of his platform and puts it out there outright that he wants to eliminate 4 federal agencies, folks. I want us to kind of just marinate on this for a minute and just let this soak into your mind. The Department of Education, we already know his war with education. We saw it in the state of Florida. We already know what's happening there. But the Department of Education, okay, so he said, all right, if we can't eliminate it, he's going to use his power to turn it towards woke ideology. Okay. The Department of Commerce, really? Okay. Energy? Oh, we have an energy crisis in this country, and now you want to eliminate the department that handles energy and the IRS. Folks, y'all hear me? Look, I didn't make this up. We didn't make this up at all. This is what the man has said. And you know what? It's interesting because Liz Cheney was, who was a Republican, Liz Cheney, who was part of that January 6th committee. She's not a fan of Donald Trump or anyone that is in that space that the former president finds himself in, that on the fringes right there, right? But she came out and said it and recently that, in order for us to see this country turn around, she said Americans have to stop voting for idiots. And some people took offense and other people didn't. But the point is that she brings up a thing about, when do we make some sound decisions? If you're looking at a candidate that's looking to completely eliminate certain elements or certain institutions of our government, if you're saying, oh, yeah, this is a guy for me, then what are you signing yourself up for? That's what I want to know. What are you signing yourself up for, right? Now, have these departments, now here's the crazy part about where we are with this whole situation, because each one of these departments probably have some level of injustice. They can, if you look in the skeletons of the Education Department, Commerce, Energy, and certainly the IRS, there are probably some skeletons in their closet as it relates to Black people, poor people, disenfranchised, marginalized people in this country, right? So they probably don't have a good track record. But it is interesting, the thing about this, that it puts Black folks and white Americans and all of us in a place where we're asking ourselves the question, like, is this candidate on the right track? Are the institutions on the right track? I mean, there is a lot of mirror facing that would have to happen in order for us to kind of process all that we're seeing right now. A presidential candidate who has come out to say he's going to eliminate 4 major agencies as part of his government, and if they don't get completely eliminated, that he would start to use his power to turn them against quote unquote woke ideology. What? All right, let me go to y'all, crew. Let me hear what y'all got to say. Corinna's been sounding the alarm about where we're going in America for these past few shows. So Corinna, I always appreciate you. But you said we are in a dangerous place. And if we continue to sleep, we will die. That's putting it lightly, Corinna. You said by we, quote unquote, I mean all of us collectively as a people. We need more soldiers in this fight. It's a war we are fighting. Absolutely. We are in a very dangerous place, folks. And going back to Liz Cheney, like, we have to make sure that it's not just the fact that we're quote unquote electing idiots. It's the simple fact that the American people are so, we're easily swayed to the point where we don't look at the full scope of a person, the full scope of their ideas, the full scope of their agenda. And we say, oh, I love this piece, I love that piece. Oh, they seem like a good person here. Or I can tell that they have a good background, or they have a good moral fortitude, or whatever the case may be, whatever metric that you use to determine whether a candidate is the right candidate for you and for your family, whatever metric that you use. Now we're in a point where you really have to double check, recheck, evaluate, assess. You got to do it all in order to make the right decision. Because if a candidate that you're choosing is this that's going to be put into office, and you're like, oh yeah, they stand for economic empowerment, but they are terrible in other aspects of the American people, for the interests of the American people, then guess what? We are in for a rude awakening. So I am right there with you, Corinna. We are in a very dangerous place. And let me just add this caveat, Corinna. We're in a very dangerous time. It's not just a place. Also, we're certainly in a dangerous place, but we're in a very dangerous time where we can't play around or take for granted where the time that we're living in. And there is a way to handle all of this. There has to be. There is a way to handle all of this. Good point. Nicole, my sister, you checked in. You said, I know he wants to close the IRS and education. I don't understand closing energy and whatever the other one was, commerce, energy and commerce. But aren't those things important too? I mean, for real, aren't they all important? What, the energy crisis in this country, we're talking about fossil fuels, we're talking about fracking. Aren't this stuff energy? We're talking about gas prices. We're talking about, heating homes and cooling homes. And you're talking about solar energy, what many people say is the green economy. These things are important for the progress and the future of the country, right? I mean, that's the place that we find ourselves in. That's the place that we find ourselves in. So I just wanted to throw this out there. I wanted to get the conversation started. We will certainly revisit this, but the man is talking about eliminating these 4 agencies. Let me get one more in. Let me see if we can get one more in. Let me see who we got. Lori, you said, so that means if he dissolved the IRS, that means that people don't need to pay any kind of taxes anymore, federal, local, state, city, even taxable merchandise. Ooh, that seems pretty logical, right, Lori? So if we're not paying taxes, what now you're putting the whole economic structure in disarray. If the American people don't pay taxes, right? Okay, fine. That old saying, death or taxes or death, that old mantra. So if we're not paying taxes, how is stuff going to get funded? How are cities the infrastructure of cities going to be built? How are schools going to be funded? Like all the things that taxes are used for, how is that going to get funded? Folks, going back to Corinna's point, dangerous place, very, very dangerous time. And this is not the time for us to lose sight of what's really important. And more importantly, this is not the time for us to fall asleep. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's check in with our sister, Dr. Iris Barnes, who is an historian and scholar. She serves as the executive director of the Hosanna School Museum, to talk to us about Juneteenth, what's next, especially in light of all that we're seeing displayed right now against our culture and our blackness. So stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture. Weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now
We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. All right, let's switch gears a little bit as we talk a little bit about politics, putting that to the side for a minute. Let's talk a little bit about our history. We know that Juneteenth was just celebrated last week, and many people were excited and happy as this is the second year of celebration or the second year of the acknowledgement of what happened to our people down in Texas who were informed 2.5 years later that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. And as a result of that, that chattel slavery had officially come to an end in Texas. But they got the notice very late. But there is need for celebration. But at the same time, as I asked earlier this week, folks, how do we celebrate Juneteenth? Is it just with music and dance and cookouts and parties? Or do we have a different approach to celebrating this major milestone in our history? And how do we take all that momentum and making sure that we can keep it going throughout the rest of the year? So for the following year, we do something different for our history. Now, here to talk to us a little bit about Juneteenth. Now, what is Dr. Iris Lee Barnes, who is an historian and a scholar. She's also serving as the executive director of the Hosanna School Museum in Maryland. And Dr. Barnes, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. How are you today?
I am well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. First and foremost, we know that the Hosanna School had a major celebration for Juneteenth. First and foremost, give us some insight. What was that celebration and how did everything go, Dr. Barnes?
Well, of course, we want to celebrate Juneteenth, but the way Hosanna approaches it, number one, you're coming out to our historic site. This is a place, a school that was built around 1867 and started and built by people who were formerly enslaved or had little or no education. So it's a whole different story if we say the county built the school and they had engineers, but you're coming to a site where this was built by the people who Juneteenth meant so much to. So you're on this land, this sacred land, this historic site, and you can get the stories behind it in our own backyards. And I encourage everyone to look at the individuals in their own communities who represent that time period, the 1860s and 1870s, and look at what they did. I think Juneteenth, besides the partying, the dancing, and the singing, we need to tell the history. And everyone should know that although we celebrate that one day, Juneteenth, that freedom came in steps. It was a process. We call it transition to freedom. You know, we know about the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, that freed the enslaved in the states in rebellion. That didn't impact Maryland, where I am, because Maryland maintained slavery until its Constitution of 1864, November 1864, so almost 2 years later. And then some people say the Civil War is when everybody was free. Well, that was April, and then we have Juneteenth. But we got to look beyond that even, because there were other systems in place such that were forced labor camps, forced labor processes that were legalized, such as apprenticeships, or even our prison system today. But if we look at even sharecropping, where another system of exploitation. So exploitation, forced labor camps or plantations continued. And so we need to look at that process and even look at today and how it resonates today. What our communities look like, what our systems look like, who has what jobs, the laws. If we don't understand the obstacles that African Americans were faced with, and then they are able to achieve, say, build a school when they're faced with schools getting burned down, churches getting burned down because the former slaveholders don't want them to get an education because they understand the transformative power of education. I hope our young people are listening. The transformative power of education. And so the churches understand, even, they understood that education was a primary source of gaining citizenship, the steps towards advancement. But they knew that they had a lot to face. So I think Juneteenth is a time to begin telling those stories and our resilience and our brilliance and what we did to overcome those obstacles. Because that's where the stories really are, our strength, the strength of the human spirit. And just, we did some things, y'all.
Well, we did some things. And Dr. Barnes, I'm glad that you laid that out. I mean, exactly. We definitely did some things. My concern is that, in the modern day culture, that in the same time that our history is under attack, that something gets lost. Either our culture, our history becomes commercialized in one extreme, or people don't want to mention it at all on the other end of the extreme, right? And so I think for Black America in particular, that it's our responsibility to ensure and to preserve those stories, that narrative, to pass on to our children, so that way they can have a better sense of things. But it's becoming harder and harder. I mean, the enemy of our rise, Dr. Barnes, is working. He, she, and they are working to make sure that we stay asleep on not just on the historical things, but we stay asleep from getting empowered by history to keep that flame, to keep the torch going, and to move it into the future. And that's the great concerns that I have.
Well, at the same time, there's that anti-Black history movement or the anti-woke movement. There's also a movement, particularly in the museum field, to ensure that we tell the whole history. As we look at Sally Hemings and Jefferson, those stories are coming out. We look at the universities and they're telling their stories of the role of African Americans in building those institutions and our role in business, the 1619 Project. So there's a movement, a counter movement to that. And I want to put my money on us, that we're going to get those stories out. We're going to get into the schools or get the students out to us and teach those stories. And I think it's vital that in all communities across the country that we teach the stories in our own backyard so that they could see it, so they can get out to those places and see it and touch it and experience it. And, I think that's vitally important that we do that.
So you mentioned a couple of things, and one of our culture crew members, Jacqueline, she put it out there. She said, Jacqueline Jackson, she said, Juneteenth should not be a celebration. Do you agree or disagree with that as a historian, as a museum director? Should we celebrate? Because maybe that is part of the disconnect. Because when we think of celebration, we think of party versus an acknowledgement. Juneteenth should be something else. Should it not be a celebration or should be a celebration?
That's a very good question. So I think we should definitely celebrate our achievements, our accomplishments against the odds. So if we have to pick a date, let's pick Juneteenth. Why not? And this is that opportunity to tell those stories while people are listening. This is a time that they're listening to hear, and they're giving you their attention. So this is the time. So I think we should definitely not just celebrate the one day Juneteenth in and of itself, but think of how we have overcome all the oppression that we have dealt with for centuries and the various ways. We still have a long way to go, that's for sure. We still have things to overcome. The struggle continues, the fight continues. Every time we think we get ahead, there's a setback, and we just need to keep our eyes open. We need to, if we can tell some of these stories and see some of the tactics that they use to overcome, maybe we can use some of those today. There's a lesson in there for us.
Hey, Dr. Barnes, we got to take a quick pause because we got to take a quick break. But I'm so happy that you brought that up. Now this is connecting the dots, folks, for a lot of folks, Doc, that the stories from the past can serve as the solutions for the future. If we know how to read history, if we know how to learn from history, that really our freedom, our justice, our equality, our liberation, our future is coming from the struggles of our people in the past. And I think that's the part, Dr. Barnes, that I want us to connect the dots to on the other side of this pause. Because if we don't use those stories to empower, it's just become stories. It's just become like fairy tales and folklore. It doesn't carry any real weight. And we don't need to hear any more fairy tales. We know Santa Claus ain't real. The Easter Bunny don't lay eggs. We don't need no more of them fairy tales. We need cold, hard truth to get us out of this condition that we find ourselves in. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation with Dr. Barnes. Make sure y'all join us in the conversation, as well as we're streaming live on YouTube under Roland Martin. Jump in the chat, share your thoughts. We'll try to get to many of your thoughts as possible. And of course, stay tuned to us on BlackStarNetwork.com as well as Amazon News. Stay with us, folks. You're tuned into The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We've been chatting it up with Dr. Dr. Barnes, Dr. Iris Lee Barnes, about Juneteenth Now What. Dr. Barnes serves as the executive director of the Hosanna School Museum in Maryland, where they had a Juneteenth celebration, but also she has been studying the trends. She's been studying our history as a scholar and an historian. And we've been talking about, okay, what's the next step now that we have the holiday in place? How do we take this holiday, build the momentum, and possibly use it to fuel the great movement that we find ourselves in, the movement for liberation, struggle, freedom, justice, and equality in this country? Dr. Barnes, again, we truly, truly appreciate your time for being a part of this conversation. So, Doc, I want to get your take on this. A couple of things that you said. First was that, the stories of the past contain some lessons and some anecdotes on how to handle things that are happening in the present moment and to ensure us a better future. And I think that is very important because that gives power to the story, right? That helps us to understand that that part of our history has significance. And I think that's important for us to connect the dots on. How do we do that? How do we do that, Dr. Barnes? How do we connect the dots with people to say, okay, even though we're talking about something that happened in the 1860s, this still might be relevant in the 2023?
Yeah, it's important. So if we look at what's going on in a particular community or housing or something like that, if we look at the laws that took place, if we look at, say, for example, land ownership, African-American land ownership, and then we look back at the laws, we'll see that we were prevented from having owning land. There were all kinds of laws in place to keep us from owning a certain amount of land, or even having certain jobs, or owning certain animals or a weapon to even protect ourselves. And if we know that, then we can have an understanding. It's not, we don't have land because we couldn't buy it or we couldn't keep it or anything like that, or that we didn't understand the value. We can understand why it is the way it is, and then take that and say, okay, what solutions can we come up with? We were faced with that then, but what are we faced with now? So if you have property, for example, in your family, how can you try to keep it in your family to gain generational wealth? Not just sell it off because everybody wants their piece, but how can you use that to grow and the wealth for your family and the next generation? So you need to think about why we are in certain situations, look at why, and then how we can overcome that and get around the systems that are in place to keep us down.
Let me ask you this question, Dr. Barnes. This might be a crazy question, but do you think Black folks in this country right now in this moment, and Black people, and I'm talking about en masse, right? Do you think we are ready to take on the necessary steps to learn from history, to use it, to chart a different path for ourselves, to chart a different path for our destiny? Do you think that we got what it takes right now?
Absolutely. I wouldn't put any restrictions on what we can do and cannot do. That's what everyone else did to us. But we know what we can do. These stories will tell us. We think sometimes we have it bad. We have a bad situation. Somebody didn't let us do this or do that. Look at some of these stories, what people overcame and what they accomplished with so many more barriers in the way. So are we ready? I think we should be ready. I think we are ready. If we hear these stories and the reactions that I see from people who are inspired by these stories and really, begin to think about what can I do? This is what they did. How can I do something similar or even more, because I have so much more? So I definitely think we're ready. We just got to get out there, tell those stories, support our museums, support our educational system, support, if the school's not telling the story, then get your kids out there to the places that are telling the stories. Support institutions that are saving places, that are preserving the places that tell our stories, that show that we existed, that we exist today, and what we did and accomplished. So, donate to Hosanna, of course, but any place that's near you that tell those stories. So I think we are indeed ready. You agree?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And I was thinking, as you were talking about taking your children to museums, I've taken my son and my daughter to, various, Black cultural museums and spaces. And we're in a point, like we already know, that a lot of things Black is being questioned and defunded and all that stuff. So my concern is making sure that those places stay open, for one. In Baltimore, my hometown, we have the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, right? Always challenged. We have the Reginald F. Lewis Museum here in Los Angeles. They have, and we're going to do a conversation about this, but they're opening the African American Legacy Center. And this is going to be another hub for us to learn about Black history. The thing is, making sure that our people first are aware that these spaces are available and open. Two, making sure that we have a mechanism by which we can support these spaces, like a Hosanna School or School Museum and other places. Because if we rely on government, if we rely on nonprofit organizations and other funders, these places won't be around for the next 15 to 20 years. They may not be around because of the climate in the country. So it's like, at this point, it's like all signs, Dr. Barnes, are leading to one direction. We have to take hold of our own destiny at this point. And that's the concern. There's another point that you made that I want to get you to kind of go a little bit deeper into, which is when you said freedom comes in steps. And I think that's a very, very interesting, fascinating, and yet powerful statement, because I think there's this expectation that freedom is supposed to happen overnight, that if we were to organize today, that we would be free tomorrow. And when I think about what happened in the summer of 2020, everybody calls it the racial reckoning. And it's not a reckoning because it's not like anything has really changed after the killing of George Floyd. But people have expected that, okay, if we do a summer of protest, things should change. Companies should start to check us out and invest in us, and then schools will get better. But freedom comes in steps. So how do we make sure that we temper the expectation, but then at the same time empower people to be in this struggle for the long haul?
So everyone has a sphere of influence. You have your community, you have different organizations around you. So how can you either volunteer? How can you either support them financially? And it's going to take us, as you mentioned, it is definitely going to take us to support them. And our allies. We can't do it alone. Because we don't have all the resources, but the resources we have, we can channel. And resources mean human and financial resources. Right. And that's going to make the difference. How we decide to rebuild and where we had success, and then maybe we had a setback, but how can we, using new strategies, rebuild? How can we teach our children various aspects of financial management or history or all of this to make a difference so that we can continue to grow in our freedom?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the big question. And, we don't have time to delve in today, but that is certainly the big question. Dr. Barnes, I'm so grateful for your time and for the opportunity to speak with you. How can people learn more about the work that you're doing with the Hosanna School Museum?
Well, they can check out our website at hosannaschoolmuseum.org, and that's HOSANNA. And we have all kinds of projects. We support student interns from colleges and universities all over with research projects, and we welcome you to join our efforts. We are doing amazing work for such a small little place in rural Hartford County, Maryland, but we are doing big things. So definitely reach out, email. I'll get your email. I'll respond back. And hopefully you can join our efforts.
Absolutely. And Dr. Barnes, we know that small efforts make the biggest impacts. Look at that. There you go. That's the beauty of modern technology. There it is right there. I want to throw out something as we close out on this part of the discussion. Janelle, my sister, Janelle Fields, you say we have what it takes, but we have to be self-motivated enough to seek out our true history so that we can learn from our past. We can't depend on the enslaver system to teach us what we need. Amen. Amen. Dr. Barnes, I truly appreciate you. Thank you for the great work that you're doing with the Hosanna School Museum. And most importantly, thank you for being so good for the culture.
Thank you, Farajii, for having me.
Absolutely.
I'll continue to watch. You're doing great work on the show.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I truly appreciate that. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the historic decision made by the Supreme Courts today, where they decided to cut affirmative action programs at two major colleges, the University of North Carolina and Harvard University. We're going to be checking in with Culture Crew member Brother Sinead Akwafor and my sister Suzette Speaks. Bring her back for this discussion, and of course with you. So we want you to join us and get ready for the conversation about affirmative action and what's next for race and college admission. Stay with us. That discussion is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland. Hey, Black, I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Welcome to the second hour. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we had two dynamic discussions about everything from Ron DeSantis in the first hour, wanting to cut 4 federal agencies, to just finishing our conversation with historian, scholar, and museum director, Dr. Iris Barnes, about Juneteenth Now What. So definitely check out the replay, be a part of Team Replay. Check us out on blackstarnetwork.com and make sure you check out the replay on Amazon News. All right, folks. Now, the big culture convo for today is about the Supreme Court, how they have delivered another major decision where some people says it is putting Black people in back another 50 years. This decision is about striking against affirmative action programs in college admissions, the consideration of race for college admissions. And this is a case that involves UNC, the University of North Carolina, and Harvard University. And this strike has been reverberating all around the country today, leaving many people to ask, well, what do you make of race when it comes down to college admissions? And so today we wanted to have this big culture convo. So happy to be joined by my brother Shinedu Wakofor, who is a diversity, equity, inclusion specialist, and my sister Suzette Speaks that you see here on Wednesdays. But I had to bring Suzette back because we just talked about the Supreme Court delivering another conversation yesterday about what's going on with the federal elections, and we're waiting on my guy Shinedu. But I want to bring Suzette on and have this part of the discussion with her about what's going on with SCOTUS. So Suzette, welcome back.
What a difference a day makes for Farajii.
Yo,
my brother. I'm just sweating. I'm so saddened by this outcome. It's unbelievable. So here we are.
No, so what just happened over the past 24 hours has made me feel like bipolar. I was like, ah!
It was a high yesterday, but we're here.
It was. So now we're at this point where SCOTUS is like, affirmative action. No. Now, this is coming for, now we know SCOTUS, and I'm saying SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, for those who aren't familiar with the term. But we know that this is a highly conservative court, highly conservative set of justices on the bench right now. But this case, this situation, how significant do you think this situation is? It just as big as what SCOTUS decided upon when it comes down to abortion, or is it even bigger?
It is comparable, Farajii. And again, thank you for having me back. I'm grateful that we are going to bring light to this major issue. This is a turbulent time now compared to where we were in terms of allowing court.
In terms of just yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, court review of voter election laws. Thank you, Supreme Court. And now the Supreme Court has basically rolled back in every significant sense affirmative action in college admissions. So what happened yesterday in this ruling is that 2 schools, as you have laid out, a public school and a private school, were being challenged for what they do in their admissions process. Now, right now, based on a case back in 2003 called the Grutter, some say Grutter case, it was allowed to have, universities were allowed to have race as a factor and when doing a holistic review of each individual applicant. So you could talk about, what school you came from and your test scores and whether or not, and we can talk about this, you were a legacy or an athlete or any number of factors that kind of painted a picture as to what diversity you would bring to the student body. Now what yesterday's ruling does, it removes it completely from being among those factors. So what Harvard had done and what UNC had done was basically had a box system where you could check a box and let them know what your race, racial or ethnic background was. Some students opted not to check a box, but now the Supreme Court has drew a definitive line saying that is no longer acceptable. And so what we're going to see in this outcome is a reverberation across the country that is going to allow for a decrease in the amount of Black and brown students that we have at top tier universities. So we know what will happen because we saw it happen in California when they voted about 25 years ago against affirmative action there in their college admissions against Proposition 209, basically. So we have data now. It's been more than 2 decades. So we know what the rest of the country might start to look like when something like this is rolled back. And again, the plaintiffs in this case, I think it was very skillful. This has been an ongoing fight by some lawyers who, you know, are right-wing aligned, who made it their mission to see this rolled back, but they were so skillful in using Asian students. Basically, we saw a minority group pitted against other minorities to say, Harvard, you were basically capping Asian admittals and admissions to about 20%. It never really went above that until maybe a year ago when they knew this lawsuit was being brought. So they used a plaintiff now that, unlike in previous cases where a white person never made this argument successfully, now we had a minority group basically making a claim that other minority groups were unfairly advantaged over them, and therefore this system is unfair under the 14th Amendment. So that's what the Supreme Court found.
So let's talk about this, the Equal Protection Clause that is a huge part of this case. Chief Justice John Roberts, when he wrote the opinion for the conservative majority, he said that Harvard and University of North Carolina admissions programs violated the Equal Protection Clause because they failed to offer, quote unquote, measurable objectives to justify the use of race. He said the programs involved racial stereotyping and had no specific endpoint. But he said this, he said both programs lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involves racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. We have never permitted admissions programs to work in that way, and we will not do so today.
Yeah, those are strong words, and I think it kind of shows you what we've been talking about here, that elections matter because Trump's 3 appointees that helped to sway this court in a more conservative direction have really taken at its face, I think, what it described there, that they believe is a race-neutral society that we live in. And me and you know that it's not race-neutral. We know that in all aspects of life, even though this ruling likes to say that there's no impact of race on, you know, what a student's experiences are, how they have access to the resources that allows people to get to these higher level institutions, and what their parents do and the education of their parents. And if they're the first to go to school in their families, there are a myriad of ways in which one can assess a candidate. The argument made before was that it benefits all of the student body for there to be a diverse student body of students. But here the court is rejecting that, saying that under the 14th Amendment, as you mentioned, that the Equal Protection Clause, meaning that people should be treated equally under the law no matter what. And we had to fight and use the Equal Protection Clause to get Black kids into these schools in the first place. But it's kind of been used in a reverse. Now, magically, we don't have the same level of need for diversity. Really, they're saying that's a flawed argument now. So what we saw 20 years ago in 2003 in Grutter, the Supreme Court has about faced, and now colleges are going to have to scramble to figure out how to keep their campuses diverse. Because if we look at California, what has happened over the last 20 years, it's been wiped out.
And see, that's the part about it, Suzette, which is, you know, colleges have quote unquote, like, I'm thinking like Harvard, Yale, some of your top Ivy League schools over these past, say, 10 to 15 years, they have, you know, tried to turn the corner on becoming more inclusive and more diverse. I know that when I was living in Baltimore, there were opportunities where you can go, a Black student from Baltimore City can go to like Harvard or Yale, right? And through certain programs, through certain means, right? But it doesn't, I'm wondering, is that going to be completely abolished at this point, right? Because now that this ruling has come down, I'm also wondering, are colleges going to actually follow this ruling? Are they going to adhere to this ruling? Especially now when diversity still seems to be the key priority for a lot of companies, colleges, and a lot of people in various spaces. So, do you think colleges are going to say, oh, okay, the Supreme Court said, no, we don't have to use race, that they're going to listen to it?
They have to. They're going to have to get very creative. And as I said, we have models in about 8 different states already across our great country. They have laws against using race as a factor among many in college admissions. And we have seen in those states marked decreases in the amount of Black students and Hispanic students that go to the best schools in that state. Now, in California, we saw shifts in this long-term outcome that people don't talk about, because if you get access to a better university, your income trajectory is actually higher, among other benefits. In terms of lifelong benefits. So we'll say, oh no, they can go to another school, just like a tier down or a tier 2 or tier 3 school. But there are market outcomes that we know now won't have the same impacts as if we were at the table at these larger schools, at these top ranked schools. So far, there have been very few systems. I think Texas might be one where they just allowed the top 10% at any school across their state gets into a state college. Now we know that they can now look at things maybe like zip code, or you can write it in your personal essay. John Roberts, in his majority opinion, did say that it can be mentioned in terms of their personal journey or how it impacts their character. And that means a lot more of our students are going to have to mention it in our essay writing when we apply to colleges. But there has never been a model just yet that has successfully kept the same level of Black and Brown students after not being able to consider race as a factor. So yeah, they're going to have to follow this. And I don't know what ways, again, there has not been a successful model. Every other state where race has been removed, it has shown that the decrease of Black and Brown students on these campuses have been even cut in half, and are just significant. So it's going to be a huge setback for one side of the coin. If we're saying diversity is important, not everybody, Farajii, is believing this. So
I get it.
What it means, but it means less of us in these higher institutions, these top tier state institutions and private institutions as well.
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. My sister Karen Connor here in LA, she said when affirmative action ended in California, Black, Indigenous, and Latino college enrollment decreased by 50%.
Significantly.
So we're starting to see, we're going to see some blowback from this. Folks, I got to take another quick pause. When we come back, more conversation with Suzette Speaks, our attorney and TV host, as we talk about this historic decision coming out of the Supreme Court of the United States, where they have decided to rule against affirmative action programs at UNC, the University of North Carolina, and at Harvard, setting a new precedent of college admissions, setting a new precedent about diversity and race, and setting a new precedent about access. So I want to get your take on this, Cruz. Share your thoughts on our YouTube page under Roland Martin as we're streaming live right there. And continue to stay tuned to us here on the Black Star Network and on Amazon News, right here to the culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking for our big culture convo today about that major Supreme Court decision that has striked against affirmative action programs at two major colleges, the University of North Carolina and Harvard University, a move that many say will push diversity, the movement for diversity back, a move that many people are concerned about as it relates to Black and brown students and getting access to quality education. And so we've been talking about this situation with our very own Suzette Speaks, who is host of the Suzette Speaks show on YouTube, and she's an attorney out of Florida. And folks, I want to hear from you, crew. I want you to just let it off. Just go in on the culture and let us know what your thoughts are about this historic decision. All right, let me just share with you, Suzette, what some of the folks are saying about this, because this is a game-changing decision once again. And it seems, I think Corinna said this earlier. She's like, she posted, she's like, it seems like every summer the Supreme Court just comes up with something to just blow us back. You know what I mean? It seemed like it's just something like, oh, y'all want to go out and enjoy the summer. Think about this. Thomas Jones, you checked in and said, we need to do more than sue. We shouldn't allow it, and stop once and for all. We lose battles like this because the unity isn't strong enough. I think all our opinions are stronger on this show. Yeah, I mean, our opinions are strong, but here's the thing, and this is part of my, to Thomas's point, this is part of my challenge. I'm gonna use that word, Suzette. Challenge. Because we are well informed on this platform, on your platform, on this show and other shows. There are shows out there, but I'm still concerned that it's not a major thing. Like, if you are in the know, and if you keep up with politics, if you work in social justice spaces, you know what I mean? But if you are just a Black person that's just going to work, living your life, and you hear about this, you're like, damn. And that's it. It's like, damn. Not understanding that this is like an announcement for warfare. This is a battle cry. So that's always been my concern. It's like, are we really pissed off enough to be able to say, you know what, let's do like Thomas said, let's not go through the same channels that we've gone through and just settle it inside some courtroom. Like, are we going to be on the front lines? Like, I don't happen, and crew, y'all tell me this, and Suzette, let me know if you see like this in Florida or someplace else. Are there major protests planned for this?
Sir.
Like when the Supreme Court decision came down for abortion, I think it was the same damn day.
There was in the street.
Started crowding around the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
I wish we had a shot of D.C. right now. I wonder who's standing in front of the Supreme Court in D.C. right now. Are people really upset about this?
We got the Twitter fingers now. We have a lot going on social media. The buzz is hot on social media right now, and I think people are shocked, and some people don't even know really the long-term implications that we're talking about. Again, Roland Martin himself talks about we have 3, 4, 5, 10-year plans, and they're thinking in 20 and 30 and 50-year plans. We exclude Black students from Harvard, for example, at half the number they're there now. It's going to be a crazier world. When we talked about yesterday, drilling down on, we need more Black attorneys, more social justice warriors, if you will. And shout out to Ben Crump and others like himself, because he just was added to the naming of St. Thomas University Law School here in Miami, and with the objective of creating more attorneys like himself, he has said. So when we're thinking about the long-term ramifications of this, I agree with you. It seems to wash over, and we have whiplash and another thing. But when the late John Lewis talked about, the fight not being over, as we kind of expounded on during our conversation yesterday, there's so many different approaches that we have to take. We cannot be asleep. Yes, we must vote, baseline. But when it comes to fighting and bringing cases forward, this was a strategy. Thank you, forefather Thurgood Marshall. He used the same 14th Amendment to defend why we were second class in education across this country for the first couple hundred years. So the idea behind what is being argued now that, diversity is important, but this is discriminatory basically to other minorities is really threading the needle, because again, we have groups being pitted against each other in such a way that whitewashes basically what the outcome will be. You had the plaintiff here, an Asian American student who came across and said, now everything is equal. But we know that race is not we putting race out there as the most important factor. We know, we live it, that it is a burden that is placed on us. We just want to live in the United States and have equal opportunity. But we know that there is ground that we have to recover from, because Clarence Thomas's parents couldn't vote. Clarence Thomas's grandparents couldn't have gone to Yale. He wouldn't sit in a Yale classroom had it not been for affirmative action. I know about it, and I know he'll say it was a blemish on him that people don't think of him as having the merits to have sat there. But it was real because there were racist admissions policies prior to this that kept the door closed. Now it can be kind of like an open. We're only looking at certain factors. And I know it sounds great in practice, but I know the outcomes is not the intent, it's the net effect. Oh, we're going to have colorblind admissions, but it's really not. They know who is coming from what zip code. They know whose family is a legacy. They know who donated to the college. They know who's, sports inclined. There are other ways in which people get the benefit that we no longer will have. So I don't want. Go ahead, sir.
No, I was just thinking about that because you're raising excellent points, and it made me think about the fact that you really, from a legal perspective, can you really create laws to speak to systemic racism? You see what I'm saying? Like affirmative action is rooted in this idea that Black people, brown people have been disenfranchised by the educational system of this country for so long that it's a way for this country to kind of level the playing field, right, in education. But I'm wondering, from a legal perspective, how do you address that problem? Well, if you can't force people through law and you're waiting on people's good benevolence, you know what I'm saying, their values and their morals to kick in, but it can't be instituted or legislated. It can't be instituted in law. It can't be legislated in policy. Like, that may never happen. So is that realistic for us to expect something like that to happen?
Well, I would say that, and just in doing my research on where this background in affirmative action came from, the argument made in this case was a diversity argument, that schools had a significant interest in diversifying the student body. They weren't making, for example, with the voting rights and the case in terms of gerrymandering that we just talked about yesterday, they weren't making an argument in terms of the long-term disenfranchisement of a disaffected minority. They were making an argument. I listened to some of the opening arguments from Harvard, and I thought, this is not a good argument. Like, they were doing it based on the diversity interests. So this has been attacked on diversity interests in terms of the grounds for which the Supreme Court said you cannot use race strictly to diversify your student body, because in fact, it is now prejudicial under the 14th Amendment to other minorities, a la Asian American students, who should be basically at a higher number. And they are saying that their seats are now being set aside, if you will, or the weight given to race is allowing for other people that their test scores or their, GPA would supersede their ability to have a seat. Affirmative action was that framework, Farajii. When even conservatives like Colin Powell talked about it, he was in support of this because he understood this was in fact a policy that was trying to rectify, some say, the racial injustice of the past. Others really argued it based on diversity and making sure the student body and the folks that were benefiting from the highest levels of education in our country, look like the country. So I don't know that we'll see more policy arguments that will be successful based on this outcome, because it's basically a rollback with just a little bit of sunlight, with Chief Justice Roberts saying that you could put it in your essay. Basically, it can be written about in terms of your personal struggle, or again, something about you as a human in terms of your character or odds that you've overcome, but it cannot be blatantly or outrightly used as a factor. So I don't know that we'll see policy in the opposite direction with this Supreme Court anytime soon.
Well, it's interesting because at the same time that Chief Justice Roberts said, and this is coming from the news report from NBC, that he did not explicitly say that the former precedents were overruled. In a concurring opinion, conservative Justice Clarence Thomas, the second Black justice to serve in the court, said that the Grutter case was for all intents and purposes overruled. So Clarence Thomas is saying, let's keep it clear. This is a new precedent. We wiped everything out from that came before this moment. This is a new precedent. We got to take another pause. And Suzette, I'm going to ask you if you could stay on just for a few moments longer, because there's a lot of conversation about, well, what this may be a victory, a win for HBCUs. No freedoms. I saw you posting that question. McCole Spicer, I saw that as well. People are saying, well, shouldn't this be good for us because now we can go to HBCUs? And I want to get your take on that. Suzette, I want to get your take on that. That as much as this is disappointing, that is this a win for the HBCU community? Can the HBCUs of this country gain and benefit from this? And I'm going to share my thoughts when we come forward. So, folks, I want y'all to stay with us. Continue to post your comments on our YouTube page under Roland Martin. And, of course, continue to stay tuned to us here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob stormed the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
There's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
And talking about the historic Supreme Court decision that was just made today, where the Supreme Court has ruled against affirmative action programs at the University of North Carolina and Harvard University, as they are pushing forward to create an admissions environment where the environment is colorblind and don't see race as a factor. This has created a lot of concern from both the legal side and the social justice side. And folks all around the country are trying to figure out, well, what is going to happen for Black and brown students, for students that are coming from marginalized and disenfranchised communities. Will they have access to quality education? Will they be able to find a pathway to getting into some of these Ivy League schools? Those questions remain unanswered. We've been talking about this with my sister Suzette Speaks, who's the attorney out of Florida, and she's host of the Suzette Speaks show on YouTube. Suzette, I want to kind of bring up what the crew is talking about around this HBCU issues. Let me start it off with No Freedoms, who checked in and said, why would I want to protest this? Because I was talking about, where's the protest? You know, just as much we saw at the abortion issue, we see hundreds of people going to be gathered in front of the Supreme Court in D.C. over the next couple of days. No Freedom said, well, why would I want to protest this? It's time to go to more Black colleges and make them better. Okay. Cleveland Williams, you checked in and said, won't this be good for HBCU enrollment? Okay. Willie Frazier, my guy, you said that's Uncle Clarence's fault. If he voted in a way that looked like it helped us, we would love him. Might have not got KBJ, though. Talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson. So people, and then Royce checked in and said, look, I think we should now support HBCUs now. So people are saying that this could potentially be a win for HBCUs. Now, others in the chat are saying HBCUs are already underfunded. HBCUs could not handle a huge influx of new students. They don't have the capacity to handle new Black students. What say you, Suzette? Do you think this is a win for HBCUs? Can the HBCUs use this as a game?
I think the word win is relative, because I'm looking at the example, as I mentioned, in California over the last 2 decades as to what the admissions look like at the top schools. And really what the research is showing is that students that once, for example, went to UC Berkeley, which is the very creme de la creme school, now Black students instead were at the next level school, maybe a UC, Davis. And those students who were now admitted to the UC Davis first try were now more likely to go to UC Santa Cruz. So there was like a scaling down for Black students as to where they were eligible to attend. So I think my rationale would be that if that is a natural progression as to what a so-called colorblind admissions would yield, therefore HBCUs should see a bump, because there are students that would have qualified to be considered for admissions at a PWI, predominantly white institution, that may no longer, depending on the tier they're trying to enter into, may no longer be able to go there. So I think as a result, we probably will see that byproduct of more students landing at HBCUs, depending on their GPA, depending on their grades and their other factors outside of scholastics, their personal story, etc. Is that considered a win? Again, is very relative, because I do think there are students that will miss certain opportunities. And hear me out. There is, to me, people always talk about college for, the degree. There are jobs all across the United States that you have to have a 4-year degree to get, even though the job don't have nothing to do with the degree you got. But we have this culture where, again, to get in the door, you need a 4-year degree, you need a, graduate degree. As I've been reading about what happened in California, when students were kind of scaled down to other schools, they were less likely to graduate. They were less likely to go to grad school. There were other residual effects that also occurred, not just in the kind of, if you will, scaling down of their level of access to admissions. So once we get students in the HBCU system, which we'll probably see a bump in, my concern is, will they be graduating and will they have access to the best opportunities once they leave? So I think ruling actually has other residual effects, not just in education, because could we be looking at affirmative action, if you will, and diversity programs as being vulnerable in, for example, hiring for the federal government, or if in our economic-based affirmative action, set-asides, if you will, or other plans where we're looking at race as a factor, whether it be in government contracting and other places. I'm wondering if this is going to be the slippery slope we're on. So back to your question about HBCUs, I think it can be a win, but to me, one of the reasons why we got to think about why we go to college and what college is, why people try to get to the best college they can get into. What college buys you is a network. We think about the school and the education the school offers, but the network you have access to is not the same network that you get to, at Harvard versus, fill in the blank. And those people end up being the folks that have what we call that institutional knowledge about how the system really works and access to power and, friends who let friends run for office and fund friends campaign. We will be in a different, maybe not less, but a different bracket. And I don't know if that's going to be good, because we know where the leadership of our country comes from. All the Supreme Courts come from Ivy Leagues, like all this. You get what I'm saying? Like
I get you.
Very few come from, PWIs that are state schools, right? Very few will have the access to these halls of power. So I hear what we're saying in terms of our developing our base, right? In terms of the HBCU culture and getting more students in those schools, I think could be a good thing. But some of the benefits of why we go to college in the first place, I don't know if, once you go to different schools, your income is affected. Like the type of job you get oftentimes is an outcome of the school that you had access to.
Oh no, hey, Suzanne,
there's a lot mixed in there, Farajii. Yeah.
Let me tell you, you hitting the nail on the head.
Consider all factors.
And we all know that. Like, let's keep it real. Some of us, I didn't go to an HBCU.
I went to a PWI myself. Yeah.
I went to a PWI. You see what I'm saying? And it's not because I'm less black. It's just simply because the programs that I was interested in was better at a PWI than it was an HBCU. So I'm certainly not one that's like HBCU or die. Right. I understand the importance and the value of HBCUs though, but I do think that is going to create, I think Corinna, who is at college admissions, she is one of our culture crew members. She's pointing out some important facts. She was like, HBCU financial aid packages pale in comparison to PWIs. That is a reality. So those saying black kids can just go to an HBCU isn't as surface as you think it is. HBCUs predominantly are in the southern part of the country. So if you're out here in California, there's no HBCU. Would you travel all the way to the
Alabama, which has the most HBCUs? Yeah, exactly.
And get your education, or would you go to a state school? California, one of the largest states in the country. Would you go to a state school where it's just a couple of hours up the road versus going across the country? Like,
and if you're going to live in that state, you want the network of the state school. So there are benefits. You see what I'm saying?
Like, is it about that? Now, Willie Frazier, my brother, he checked in and talked about, well, if there's more black college students that are coming into the HBCUs, wouldn't that create a frenzy or like an urgency for more funding with the schools? It could, but here's the thing, folks. Like, and I'm not saying this to throw no shade. If the HBCUs are going to be a part of this national conversation in a big way, the HBCUs have to have better infrastructure. We talked about it on the show. We're talking about better dorm rooms, better buildings, right? They have to make sure that they do have a more diverse curriculum Because why? Black students are getting into all different areas, not just into your arts and your science and technology, right? I mean, the HBCUs would require HBCUs to step up in a very, very big way to be able to handle this. And I don't know if we should put that on HBCU system. I don't know.
I mean, as a result, just as a byproduct, they are going to have a lot more students, I think. And I think
we're going to have a lot more students, right? But going back to the point that you made.
But successfully graduating them as a whole, like not all HBCUs are even created equal from my understanding. I've been reading, I have 2 little cousins getting ready to go to college, and when they're applying to different HBCUs, the graduation rate scared me on a couple. I was like, what? Only 1/3? And then I'm not going to name the school, of people who graduate. That's a problem. So we're not going to say all HBCUs are created equally. And I think there are problems at PWIs as well. So, I mean, there's equal opportunity to understand that no educational institution is, perfect. And with funding, we would see better infrastructure like you talked about. I'm like, kids don't not graduate in a vacuum. They need support. They need financial aid. They need, the guidance of, all levels, from the academic counselors to what's happening outside. I mean, we have students that, depending on what background they came from, maybe don't know how to maneuver through a college. That is in itself a big deal. So, and if your parent didn't go to college, you don't know the ropes, if you will. So there's a lot of other kind of issues that non-traditional students maybe have, or students who are like first in their family or had, lower GPAs or lower, not all Black students have lower anything, but I'm just saying in the discussion we're having now, for argument's sake, if they are struggling already or barely at, a certain level, it's not the HBCU's fault necessarily, but we have used our HBCUs in this country as a catchment, really, for students that might not do well or don't have the aptitude with regards to what they received in high school to do as well at a regular PWI as they could. So I think we're going to have to really lean in terms of making our HBCUs what we want them to be, which is, again, very strong, well-funded institutions that support Black excellence. And I think they can do that, but it's going to be a lot more students. So we got to be prepared for that.
We do got to be prepared. We got to take a quick pause. But here's the other thing. If you're talking about HBCUs, for any graduate of HBCUs, how many of us actually give back to that money, give back to that institution? How many give, as an alumni of an HBCU, how many folks put it in their budget line that you're going to give, I don't know, $50 a month to your HBCU?
I can't speak to that, so I'm
I can't speak to it, but I'm saying, because I know HBCUs suffer and are challenged by alumni not giving, and I'm talking about Black alumni not giving back. We go to the games, we go to the step shows, we go to the parades, we go to the homecomings and all of the special stuff, but I'm talking about that consistent funding. We talking about state funding, we talking about extra funding, but that consistent funding only comes from the people.
Yeah.
And if the alumni don't step up,
yeah.
It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. Look, we got to take another quick pause. When we come back, more conversation. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about affirmative action and what does it look like for college admissions. Been chatting it up with my sister, Suzette Speaks, who's an attorney, and she's the host of the Suzette Speaks show on YouTube. Make sure y'all follow her on her YouTube page. She's doing dynamic work of informing the people and keeping it real for the culture.
Hey.
So I always appreciate her. She's doing double duty this week, so I am eternally grateful for her insight. But Suzette, I want to. There was another question outside of the HBCU piece. There have been a couple of folks in the chat, some crew members who are saying, like, how does a decision like this that affects 2 schools wind up being a precedent for all schools? How can you explain that?
Yes, I sure can. And I see the comments too. HBCUs have wonderful networks. I'm not hating. Please let me be clear, because I know when I know my brothers and sisters who came from HBCUs, I know, especially like a Howard and other places, they look out. The FAMU people in Florida.
But not all HBCUs are the same, Suzette.
Exactly, but not everyone is created equally. And I also saw
you can say Morgan and Howard and FAMU.
I know, well-funded alumni base and all that. Everybody's not that. Let's just be real. So, and I hear you when you say they're expensive too. Many are private, and a lot of people won't be able to afford to go to HBCUs, especially if they're down south, like you said, and you're another part of the country. Moving there alone and the expense of staying there is going to be very difficult for a lot of people. So maybe they won't get the bump. I see those comments, and thank you for that feedback. But how this works in the United States when it comes to the Supreme Court is that when there is a judicial or justiciable issue, where there's a legal question, basically, that is being challenged up our court system. Now, it always has to start at the ground level, which is your bottom state court, right? What we call here in Florida district court. It can be called another court, but it's the basic court up to the state Supreme Court, and it has not been resolved. If there are 2 opposing opinions across 2 different courts, they can be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, which will be the final court of arbitration, meaning they have the final say. So there were different court rulings across the country when it came to race-based admission or having race as a factor, as it was used in college admissions. And then the Supreme Court's, our Supreme Court also has the ability to choose what cases they take. So Farajii, from the time that they chose to hear this case, people already figured they were going to do something with it. They might overturn it because just because 2 cases are in disagreement over 2 different lower courts doesn't even mean they have to hear it, right? The Supreme Court chooses what's on its docket. So they chose to take up this case, meaning many observers knew that they were going to try to make some kind of significant change, like we saw with the Dobbs decision and abortion. So here we are. Once they decided at the very top, it's the law of the land, right? So you don't have, once the Supreme Court gets it, you don't have this kind of patchwork. Well, Michigan did it this way and Harvard did it that way and North Carolina did it this way. No, after it goes to the Supreme Court and they rule, that is our national precedent.
Wow. So what happens next here, Suzette, as we try to find some pathway of like what's the next step for us to take? What happens is next? The decision has been made. Those cases has been ruled upon. And so now we just got to live with the consequences. Is that is that what I'm hearing? You gotta just live with it. You gotta eat it.
The phase of education is going to change so much because again, people who used to have access to certain schools are not going to have access anymore. And again, the elite schools of our country are going to be less diverse. Only people from mostly families who've already been to college or have money or have access to what it takes in terms of a lifestyle for a person to be a happy and healthy, high school student so that they can be a great candidate to be a college student. So there are many factors that impact an individual, including race, as to why and how they score on tests and what kind of student they may be if given the opportunity. But they may not have the traditional kind of cross the board, everybody is one size fits all in a box kind of ability. So that leeway, that wiggle room has been removed. So what will happen? College, again, it wasn't successful in California. We've got to get very creative And I think the pressure now falls back on colleges and universities on how they are going to try to work around this. Again, they can ask other questions. Are you, the first person in your family to go to college? Do your parents have, college degrees or graduate degrees? There are other ways, again, your zip code, perhaps, because they know what schools, like in Texas, as I mentioned before, they have a top 10% period, no matter what the school. So they know in zip codes that are predominantly Black and brown, them 10% just, they get in just like every other 10%, no matter, where you are. So I don't know if they'll follow, maybe trying to use that model, or maybe there are creative frameworks that basically haven't been used in California yet. But There's going to be a lot of pressure on us to get our students ready. Like we have to, it's almost going to be like back to the village. We're going to have to figure out whether they come from, households where your parent might not have had that experience. How do we get them exposed so that they are more ready and able to kind of live up to the expectation of the school they want to get into? So it's going to be, I think, community-based effort. I think it's going to be the college level based effort. Harvard and them going to have to get creative. I'm not quite sure what the answer is. Maybe it's a model like Texas. We'll see. But, it's going to take all hands on deck in terms of this diversity piece to see more of us in these same schools. Again, your network, your income ultimately over your lifetime is determined oftentimes by the college you go to, right? And your access to power. So absolutely give it up that easily, but we got a big fight on our hands, long road ahead.
Absolutely. And I got like 30 seconds before we take our final pause, but I want to get your take on this. 30 seconds. We often think about the implications and the impact on Black students. But in a case like this, you got to think about Asians, Latinos, those who are not in the majority, those who are not a part of the Black community. This is going to affect them as well.
Asian and middle is probably going to go up. So where Harvard had an average of 20% in each class of Asian students, they're probably going to see a market increase. Again, when you come from a family background that has also had a college experience or a graduate school or even third degree experience, you're more likely to be in a group of students that has a higher SAT. You're more likely to have a higher GPA. You're more likely to score better on standardized tests as a whole. So there's a built-in advantage there. I want to know if they're going to look at legacy. Those people who get the bump because their granddaddy and their daddy went there or gave money. Are they going to also take away the athletic factor of being an athlete? As you know, your scores may not be high, but you can play sports. So we want a diverse student body. Are those now going to come into question, or any other of these kind of holistic factors that we were used to having as a part of, drawing up a diverse campus and student body? We're going to see in California, Black students never really recovered at all at the top schools, and Hispanic actually went up a little bit over the last 20 years since Proposition 209. So we'll see. I think, again, white and Asian students will probably go up at some of these a higher level so-called elite institutions, and we're going to have to fight to be at those institutions so that we don't see kind of the reversal of the progress we've been making in this country.
Absolutely. Suzette, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us this afternoon to kind of give us your insight, breaking this all down for us. So folks, make sure y'all check her out. Suzette Speaks on YouTube. Follow her, support her on Pantheon and all of her platforms. She's doing amazing work. But Suzette, y'all can definitely follow her and find her on
all
Wednesday.
Social media. Thank you, Suzette.
All social media, and she's here on Wednesdays, giving her her law expertise and so much more.
My pleasure.
On The Culture. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. We got to take a final
See you soon. I'm available tomorrow too, Farajii. So
okay. Yes. All right. Well, that's good.
Thank you. Great discussion. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. When we got to take a quick pause, when we come back, some final remarks. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Take some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, as we wrap up today's show, I just wanted to point out that there's going to be so much conversation about this. And the conversation we just had about SCOTUS and this historic decision, just really like the tip of the iceberg. And so I think it is going to be very, very important that we do have some much more in-depth discussions about the impact of this new ruling and how it's going to look for the educational landscape for Black and brown students. So I am interested in kind of going further. My sister Corinna, she said perhaps we need to talk all things college one of these days with the in-house college counselor, making the point that there is much not knowing in these comments today. We should learn about these systems, and it's going to be super, super important. So Corinna, to your point, I am open to having the conversation about at least about college admissions and understanding the dynamics of college admissions, college funding, and all of those things as we're talking about what is going to be the educational experience for Black and brown students, in the very, very near future. But, this is an ongoing conversation, and I hope that you found it to be both informative and enlightening that we had it the way we did have it with our sister Suzette Speaks today. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. Make sure you do your due diligence by supporting us here at Black Star Network. Support the culture. Go to our website today at blackstarnetwork.com. blackstarnetwork.com. You can go to our website, download the app for free on all of your devices, and more importantly, if you can, give something to support this Black-owned media platform that's having conversations like no other media space in the world. So your support means everything. You hear Roland say it, I'm going to say it, we're going to keep saying it, because your support makes all the difference in the world, and your involvement, your participation. As my culture crew, as the culture crew, everything that you say is important. Even if we don't always agree, this is a space for everyone to be heard, because we got to get through all of the conflict, through all of the dialogue, and through all of the other stuff. And if we're talking about making some true and real progress. So we're not backing down from having a little disagreement, a little argument, as long as we understand that the end goal is making progress for Black America and for this country. So big shout out to you as my culture crew. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms. Follow me at The Real Farajii on Twitter and on Instagram, and at Farajii on Twitter. And I would love to connect with you. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture, right here, only here, exclusively here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Peace.